This is a basic introduction to the new CSS property found in Photoshop, CS6, and the Creative Cloud. And today we're going to look at converting this PSD to HTML and CSS using that new property. So I have here a basic navigation layout with some shape layers and text layers. And we're going to look at how these are treated with the CSS property. This SM header background is a shape layer, and I'm going to right click, copy CSS, go to my favorite code editor, Coda, and I have a basic structure here with a head and body. I'm going to paste in my styles. You can see that the title of my layer is copied as a class, and it does have some absolute positioning which you may or may not want. And let's see how this outputs by creating a div with a class of SM header. And you can see it output this, my purple small header there, just fine. If we go back to our Photoshop, let's take a look at what happens when we try to copy just a flat raster background image. So I'm going to right click, copy CSS, and if I paste in this style, you can see that instead of giving me a background color, it's given a background image. Now, if in some instances you may want this to be an image, in our case we want this to be as optimized as possible by just using a solid background color. So in this instance, or in most instances, you'll want to have a shape layer for any background colors. Let's take a look at what happens if we were to add a gradient to this background. So let's add a gradient overlay and reduce the opacity, just a subtle effect. And let's copy this CSS and see what our output is. So right away we can see it did not copy both the gradient and the background purple color. So what we can do to fix that, unfortunately I think it'll be a future update in Photoshop, we'll have to change this. We've lost our alpha channel in our gradient. So if you're familiar with RGB, you'll know that the zeros are black and this 255 is the white. And let's turn this to RGBA for alpha and add our alpha number here. And do the same for all of your compatibility. Do the same for the black. So now we have a gradient over the purple. And actually, if we were to take off this one, we would lose that purple. So we need to make sure and use the background color, or if you're familiar with the background shortcut, you could combine this into the single background property. So there we have a small header background with a gradient. Let's see how Photoshop copies text as CSS properties. So let's copy our set up a personal appointment. And you'll see that the naming of your layers is important. So if we wanted that to be a little bit simpler for our future development, we might want to make this like a P tag or a span tag. And you'll see it's given us font size, font family, our color, all those things that help speed up our workflow. let's add our new span. With our copy. And we have our absolute positioning, so this isn't exactly previewing, well, maybe it is correctly. So overall, it's nice that we can just grab the size and the family and a lot of properties of the CSS, but there still is some imperfections on the positioning and some widths and heights. Let's look at how Photoshop treats a border on a rectangle. So initially I had these as lines, but it was copying background, and we actually want these to be a border. So these are white backgrounds and they are shape layers, and they have a stroke on them. Obviously this would be our nav. So I'm not going to actually want that to be a div. And we can see it copied our border. We actually only want a border left or a border right. So we would combine this into the shortcode of border a little cutting and pasting. So now we have the exact color and pixel width. Let's do another copy of our text. Strip out these absolute tags or properties. And now we have our main navigation text styled. This is helping us get a bit of a jump start on converting this to our HTML and CSS.